this guy cracked the code to online dating and built a multi-billion-dollar company with his best friends. But they ended up starting a business war so brutal it almost destroyed everything. Now the guy's name is Justin. And Justin is 26 years old when the story starts in 2012. He's a young, ambitious marketing guy working inside a tech incubator in West Hollywood, California, and he's staring at a problem that has plagued every single person in their 20s since the beginning of time. How do you talk to a stranger without the soul-crushing fear of being rejected? You see, Justin is looking at the dating world and he realizes it's completely broken. In 2012, online dating was seen as something for lonely and desperate people. The websites were clunky, they were full of long, boring bios, and you had to spend hours sending messages into a void only to get nothing back. It felt like a job interview that never ended. But Justin has a secret weapon. He's working with a group of friends, including a brilliant developer named Jonathan and a creative strategist. We'll call her this lady. They're all living the high-pressure, high-glamour life of Los Angeles, and they want to build something that feels like the world they live in. They don't just want a dating site, they want a gamified platform. They want something that feels as addictive as a nice club and as fast as a social media feed. And this app, they want to call it Matchbox, which later became Tinder, the popular dating app. However, to understand why this story becomes a tragedy, you first have to understand the dynamic in that room. These weren't just business partners, they were a tight-knit circle of friends who went to parties together and shared every secret. But in the world of high-stakes startups, friendship is often the first thing that gets traded for equity. Now, the light bulb moment for Tinder didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened because Jonathan, the dev guy, was obsessed with the math of human interaction. He realized that the biggest barrier to dating was the ego bruise, which is on this wise. If you walked up to someone in a bar and they said no, your night was ruined. But what if you could eliminate the no? What if you only knew about the people that said yes to you? They called it double opt-in. It was a simple piece of logic that changed the world. If two people like each other, they both get notifications. But if one person doesn't, nobody ever finds out. And it was actually a safety net for the human ego. But it still had a big problem. The app was boring. You had to click a green button for yes and a red button for no. It felt like taking a test. And this is where the genius of the swipe comes in. One morning, Jonathan was in his bathroom wiping the steam off the mirror. He realized that the motion of his hand, the side-to-side flick, felt incredibly satisfying. It was a physical, tactile movement. So he went back to the office and told the team, "We're getting rid of the buttons. We're going to make them swipe." Now listen, you have to understand the psychology behind this, okay? By turning a human being's face into a card that you can easily flick away with your thumb, they had accidentally tapped into something called variable ratio reinforcement. It's the exact same mechanism that keeps people sitting at slot machines in Las Vegas for 10 hours straight. So basically, you swipe, you see a face, you don't like it, you swipe again. Maybe the next one's a match. The match is the jackpot. They had turned the search for love into a dopamine-fueled game, and this made Tinder blow the up. But as the app started to explode, civil war began to simmer under the surface. You see, the fame was hitting them fast. Justin was the marketing guy of the company, Jonathan was the computer brains, and this lady was the hyper soul who was actually going from college campus to college campus, throwing parties to get the cool kids to sign up. And as the company grew into a multi-billion-dollar monster, the internal power struggle became toxic. And this is where the story takes a dark turn into betrayal. According to legal filings that will later shock the industry, the environment inside the office turned into a boys' club. This lady, who had been instrumental in the company's success, allegedly began to be sidelined. There were arguments over titles, arguments over credit, and eventually the professional relationship between Justin and this lady, who had been romantically involved, completely imploded. Let me explain. You see, while they are building the next dating bridge of the modern internet, Justin and this lady are busily doing something else. As if the Titanic wasn't sunk by a love story. Anyways, Justin is the chief marketing officer of the company at this point, and this lady is the VP of marketing. So they are all in the marketing department, and she actually reports to him as a senior executive. But regardless of their friendship and the expected professional ethic at work, Justin, he thinks this lady is fine, and she also thinks he's fine, and they start smashing. And this actually kept on going for quite some time. However, just like almost every other relationship on the planet, it had to end. And it did on a really really bad note. So much so that in a move that would eventually lead to one of the biggest lawsuits in tech history, this lady was forced out of the company she helped build. She was allegedly told that having a female co-founder made the company look like an accident and that it devalued the brand. And I'm guessing you are guessing that Justin is the one behind all this. And so she leaves with a shattered reputation and a massive amount of resentment. But if the guys at Tinder thought she was going to go away quietly, they were dead wrong. Meanwhile, as she was plotting her revenge, the chaos inside Tinder was only getting started. The company was growing at a pace that was impossible to control. The double opt-in was creating a financial empire. They were getting millions of users a day, and they were slowly becoming a cultural phenomenon that was being discussed on every late-night talk show in America. But the insane level of stress was starting to break the remaining founders. They were being bought out by a massive conglomerate called Interactive Corp, and the founders were fighting over how much they were actually worth. Justin and Jonathan, the best friends who started it all, found themselves on opposite sides of a billion-dollar valuation dispute. Ayak eventually came to own a majority stake in the company and began to realize that having a group of feuding 20-somethings in charge of a multi-billion-dollar asset was a recipe for disaster. Justin, who had fought so hard to be a strong pillar in the establishment, suddenly found himself in the crosshairs. The lawsuit had created a massive PR nightmare, and alongside the unprofessional environment he had encouraged, the executive board could no longer ignore him being a liability. So in 2014, he was suspended from his CMO title and resigned shortly after. For a guy who had built his entire identity on being a co-founder for Tinder, the fall was devastating. He had helped build the kingdom, but now he was no longer allowed to be the hand of the king. And I know by now you are dying to know who is really the king of this kingdom, the CEO of the company. Relax, it's not Jonathan, so keep listening. Now, I'm gonna touch base on this lady's revenge plot in a jiff. While Jonathan was watching from the sidelines, Tinder became a monster. They introduced Tinder Gold and Tinder Plus, turning those dopamine hits into a subscription model that generated hundreds of millions of dollars in pure profit. The app became the highest grossing non-gaming app in the world, but for Justin, the victory was bittersweet. He was a millionaire, sure, but now he had become an NPC in his own dream game. It's the classic startup tragedy. The more successful the company became, the more it destroyed the people who actually made it. The group of friends who used to grab drinks in West Hollywood were now only speaking to each other through high-priced lawyers. This lady didn't just take a settlement from the lawsuit and hide. She took the same swipe logic, identified the biggest flaw in Tinder, the fact that women were often bombarded with aggressive messages, and built her own weapon. She called it Bumble. In a version of the game, only the women could make the first move. She took the slot machine and gave the control to the female players. And within a few years, Bumble became a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. Thus, she had beaten the boys' club at their own game. Today, Tinder is the undisputed king of the dating world, but the cost of that crown was a total destruction of the friendships that created it. The swipe logic changed how most human beings in the online dating circle meet, but it also proved that in the world of high-tech business, a match is never guaranteed to last. It makes you wonder, if the founders had focused as much on their own relationships as they did on the double opt-in for their users, would they still be friends today, or is a billion-dollar idea always meant to tear people apart? Now, this is a little bit of a fact check. This guy here is called Rad, and Sin was the very first CEO of the company. So he was actually part of the group of friends who founded Tinder. But so is this guy and this other guy. Yeah, they're quite a bunch. So I decided to exclude them because I wanted to limit the number of characters in the story in order to make it easily consumable. But I don't want you assuming that the three friends I mentioned in the story were the only co-founders of Tinder. This lady, her real name is Whitney Wolfe. Yeah, I'll talk about a wolf and a head in the same name. Anyways, after she took her share of Tinder, like I mentioned in the story, she built Bumble and went on to become the youngest self-made female billionaire in 2021. So, good for her.